the cup of wine, what do you say? What do you do when you say bracha on wine? You do what? You drink it. So what comes out if you put that explanation inside the sentence? You say bracha on wine, you drink it, and then you say birkat hamazon, which means by definition, you have no cup of wine while saying birkat hamazon, because remember, you only had one cup. That would indicate that you're saying benching without a kos shel yayin, without a cup of wine, which would mean that Shammai do not require a cup of wine for benching. Says the Gemara, no. Lo, the mevarech ilaveh umanachle. Says no. You say the bracha on it, and then you leave the cup for benching. You say b'rei gefen, and then you just put it down, and then you pick it up again for benching. So it says the Gemara, what? V'hamar mor, didn't we learn hamevarech sarich sheyitom, that when you say the bracha, you at the very least have to taste it. You can't just say birkat ne'enin and borei pri ha'etz. What a beautiful apple it is, borei pri ha'etz. And you're eating it like 2 hours from it. You can't do that. When you say bracha on birkat ne'enin, you have to have a taste. Says the Gemara, the time le. Says, yeah, we're not talking about he's not tasting it. He's tasting it. In other words, he says borei pri ha'gefen, takes a little small sip, puts it down, and keeps it for birkat hamazon. Gemara says, that's not possible either. Rabotai, why is that not possible? Because there's a problem. For kosher bracha, right, or kosher kiddush, you have to have a cup of wine that's not pagum. It's not drank from, right? If you drink from it, you make it pagum. It's not, it's a cup that someone drank from it. It's not kavod for the wine, for the bracha birkat hamazon, or kiddush to be said on a blemished cup, so to speak, right? So v'hamar mor, that's what the Gemara asks. V'hamar mor ta'amo pegamo. If you taste from it, if you sip from it, now you made it pagum, you made it blemished. The Gemara says, no. The time le bede, he would taste from it with his hand. In other words, you're holding the cup in your hand, right? This is great. Right on time. You're holding the cup, you say the bracha, it says hot water, I'm not going to burn myself, but you just spill a little bit on your hand, and that's what people do. People who get the bracha of borei pri ha'gefen for sheva brachot under the chuppah, right? Nowadays, not all the 7 brachot are said by one person, right? They call different people, and sometimes until the 7th guy comes up, Mashiach is already there. So, he said half an hour ago, he said, borei pri ha'gefen, you have to drink from it because you're the one that said borei pri ha'gefen. So many people, you'll see that the briskers used to do that. They spill a little bit of the wine on their hand and they hand it to the Mesader Kiddushin, and then they just, on the side and have a little sip from the wine. This way, you use the wine and you didn't make the cup pagum, because they still need to say the rest of the brachot on it, right? So this is exactly what comes from the Gemara, really, right? The time lebede, you pour a little bit of it in your palm of your hand and you sip it. This way, the cup does not become pagum, and yet you get to taste it and keep the cup full for birkat hamazon. So in other words, so far we're saying that no, Bet Shammai does require a cup of wine for birkat hamazon. They said that you said the bracha of borei pri ha'gefen. Yeah, you said the bracha and you leave the cup of wine for birkat hamazon. How can you leave it? You have to taste it. Yeah, you're tasting it. But you can't taste it because it makes it pagum. Yeah, you pour it in your hand a little bit and you taste. That's the sequence of things. But now we're saying basically, both Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai, they hold that you have to have birkat hamazon on a cup, right? Says the Gemara, "V'hamar mor kos shel bracha sarich shiur." But we learned that you need at least a shiur of revi'it for kos shel bracha. You can't just have one of these mini cups that we have over here and say birkat hamazon on it. You need at least a revi'it of wine. So if you have a revi'it of wine in your cup and you pour a little bit of it on your hand before you start Birkat Hamazon, can you say now Birkat Hamazon on that cup of wine? No, because it's less than the shiur, because you started with Revi'it, and now you poured some of it on your hand to take a sip. So now the cup contains less than Revi'it. You cannot say Birkat Hamazon on that. The Gemara says, wait a second, who said that we only have a Revi'it? You have more than a Revi'it. Right? That would be the simple answer. The follow-up question shows you why the Gemara assumed that you only have one Revi'it. Says the Gemara, V'haka pachidle, when you sip from it, you are making it less than a Revi'it. Pachidle mishiure. The Gemara answers, no. Then nafish letfe mishiure. You started with more than a Revi'it. So you spill a little bit on your hand, you still have Revi'it in the cup. No problem. The Gemara says, no, you don't understand what I'm saying. We learned in the Mishnah that you only have a shiur of one cup. What's the shiur, minimum shiur of one cup? Revi'it. So you have exactly Revi'it, it seems, from the Mishnah. So if you pour some of it on your hand, what happens? Your cup is pasul for Birkat Hamazon because you have less than Revi'it. Gemara says, no, you misunderstood the Mishnah. When the Mishnah says you only have one cup, it means you don't have two cups. You don't have two Revi'its, because if you had two Revi'its, it would be easy, would be no question. You would say one bracha on Birkat Hamazon av Sudash Lishit. You would have the wine, and then you would have a full cup left for Havdalah. So up until and not including two full Revi'its is called, for our purposes, is called that you have one cup. But you could have two Revi'its chaser mashu. You could have two Revi'its minus a little bit and still it's called you have only one cup because you don't have two. Our discussion is, do you have two cups worth of wine to make Havdalah and Birkat Hamazon separately? And the case of the Mishnah is, no, you don't. You only have enough for one, not two. What do? That was the question. But it doesn't say ever that you only have one Revi'it. You could have two Revi'its. Revi'it halog, right? Remember all the things that we did? Ka'askalav yagodu, right? Translate the Revi'it is 1/4 of a log, which is, well, depending on what shita you hold on, is around 3 ounces of wine, right? So if you have, let's imagine if Revi'it would be exactly 3 ounces. If you have 6 ounces minus just a little bit, you still don't have 2 Revi'its. So even if you have 5.5 ounces of wine, you still have only 1 cup to deal with for both Birkat Hamazon and Havdalah. So what do? You have the 5.5 ounces in your cup, you pour a little bit in your palm and you drink it, still have plenty left in the cup, so you have for sure 3 ounces left in order to say Birkat Hamazon. That's the
same issue if you have like a cup that has, let's say, 2 Revi'its in it, but you don't have another size cup that fills that measures the Revi'it, right? So if you had like 1 cup with two Revi'its plus a little bit, but no other cup at that size.
Right, so that's a different issue. We're going to allude to that a little bit later, but that's a simpler thing to deal with it, because at least you have the 2 Revi'its, but there you have the problem that we discussed before, that kosher bracha needs to be full, has to be maleh, right? So that's the problem we will have to deal with. Says the Gemara, V'ha'im im ein sham ela oto kos katani tere lo have umechad nafish. You don't have 2. So in other words, in our example, you don't have 6 ounces, but you have more than 3 ounces. So you pour a little bit of it to drink on your hand, it is fine. V'hatani Rabbi Chia bet Shammai omrim mevarech al hayayin v'shotehu v'achar kach mevarech birkat hamazon. He said, I have a checkmate braita. What's a checkmate braita? We learned in the name of Rabbi Chia that Bet Shammai holds. Look at how Rabbi Chia says over the Shita of Bet Shammai. In other words, beforehand, we said over the Shita of Bet Shammai that you say the bracha, and afterwards you say Birkat Hamazon, right? Mevarech on wine, you say bracha on wine, and then you say Birkat Hamazon. And then we had this pull back and forth. Well, if you say bracha on wine, it means you drink it. So no, you don't drink it, you just taste it, it becomes pagum. You remember that whole chain of events. Rabbi Chia says to Bet Shammai, spells it out that you drink the cup. So you can't get better than that. Basically, he says, you say bracha on wine, you drink the cup, and then you say Birkat Hamazon. That's checkmate. Which means you only had one cup to begin with. You said Birkat Yayin for Bria Geffen, you drink it, and then you say Birkat Hamazon. What are you saying Birkat Hamazon on? Nothing. Because you drank the whole thing. And he spells it out, Rabbi Chia. It leaves you no room to wiggle to try to say, well, you're tasting it, you're putting it on your hand. That's Rabbi Chia. Says, let's read it inside. V'hatani Rabbi Chia, 2 lines up from the wide lines. Bet Shammai Omrim, Rabbi Chia explains the Shita Bet Shammai in a bright that says like this. Mevarech al hayayin v'shotehu. You say bracha on the wine and you drink it up. And then you say Birkat Hamazon. Which means you're saying Birkat Hamazon on no wine. So says the Gemara, you're right, that's checkmate. There are 2 different Tanaim explaining Bet Shammai differently. In other words, it's Machloket Tanaim, what Bet Shammai held. Did Bet Shammai hold that you have to say Birkat Hamazon on a cup of wine, like Bet Hillel, or they held, like Rabbi Chia holds in Bet Shammai, that they did not require you to say Birkat Hamazon on a cup of wine? Yes. Why do you need to say anything on wine?
No, I'm saying why do we need to wait why does it have to wait?
So well, we had some of the, I don't know how much of this you discussed before, but this was the discussion of what comes first exactly. You know, what takes priority to what in the timeline of what you do. There are different priorities. Which one do you say first? So, well, if the Bet Shammai does not require that you should say Birkat Hamazon on wine, that's easy answer, right? If they do require you to say it, right? So then you're saying Birkat Hamazon after you're saying the bracha of wine, because the wine comes first, like we had by the other sugya in the Mishnah, how Bet Shammai hold that you say Birkat Yayin after the bracha of Kiddush versus the Bet Hillel holds you say Birkat Yayin before the bracha of Kiddush. That's the priority line of what comes first before what, which is a topic by itself. But if you do say, if you do require to have Birkat Hamazon on wine, then it becomes a question. If you don't require, Bet Shammai does not require the Birkat Hamazon to be said on wine, then it's a open and short case. You don't even need it for Birkat Hamazon. Says the Gemara.
Rabbi. So can you explain what's the mean Tanaim dispute? That means that 2 different sages had a different interpretation of what
Bet Shammai held.
How can that be? They have 2 interpretations. They just
The Gemara says, "Misheloshi mishu talmidei Bet Shammai uBet Hillel nitlabu machlokot beYisrael." When you don't have good students that they make sure to understand well what the Rabbi says, then you'll have a machloket what the Rabbi said.
I see.
This does happen, and it started actually from the students of Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel.
So pay close attention to Amud Yomi.
Yep. Says they didn't have recordings back then. Says the Gemara, first wide line. Bet Shammai omrim. Tanu Rabbanan. Bet Shammai omrim notnin leyadayim v'achar kach mozgin et hakos. We had this machloket in the Mishnah, and this is where the daf becomes complicated, because now this is where Berachot meets Taharot, right? So we had a seemingly innocent machloket of Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel. When do you wash your hands? They had the wine before the Suda. We learned this before in the previous Prakim. They had wine before Suda, they had wine during Suda, they had wine after Suda. When, in the timeline of your process of Suda, do you wash your hands with Yadayim? You want to have some wine, and then you want to have Hamotzi. Do you wash your hands before you have the wine prior to Hamotzi? You already do Netilat Yadayim, and then you sit and you sip your wine, preparing for your Suda, and then you say Hamotzi. Or do you sit and have your wine, and then whenever you're ready for Suda, you go get up and wash your hands, Netilat Yadayim. So Bet Shammai said you wash your hands prior to drinking wine prior to Hamotzi. And Bet Hillel said, no, you drink without Netilat Yadayim, whenever you're ready for hamotzi, you wash your hands. That was the machloket. And seems like a very innocent machloket, but it's all through and through taharot. Both of them have a specific reason for doing one and not doing the other one, and all of it has to do with the laws of Tumah v'Tahara. We will try our best to explain. Says the Gemara. You first do the time, then you sit to drink your wine before the Suda. If you say the opposite, if you say like Bet Hillel, that you first have your cup of wine and then you wash the Yadayim, so what happens? You know what's going to happen? Your hands are going to be tameh. And your hands are going to have to touch the cup. Sometimes you have droplets of water outside the cup. And when your hands that are tameh, which we're going to explain right now, touch this, they make the drink, the liquid, the droplets of water on the outside tameh. And that is going to make the cup tameh. And now you are using a tameh cup to eat your seudah during the course of seudah. And that is not acceptable for Bet Shammai, as we will explain. And therefore, says Bet Shammai, we can't have that. So wash your hands with Yadayim. So the cup is tahor because Bet Shammai hold you cannot use any tameh utensils during the course of your Suda. So we're not worried that the cup is tameh. The cup is tahor. And my hands are going to be tahor because I washed before I sat to drink. So everything is tahor. I'm good to go. That's how Bet Shammai says it.
Tameh, impure.
Impure. Yeah. So Bet Hillel says exactly the opposite. Bet Hillel say, well, it's not asur to have tameh cups on the table. But you know what the big problem is? The bigger problem is if you wash your hands with Yadayim, right? So your hands are clean now, and you're not going to be washing before Suda anymore. So what happens is your cup could be tameh, your hands could be wet, damp a little bit from the Netilat Yadayim, right? And then when you touch it, the water in between becomes tameh, which in turn will make your hands tameh, and you're eating your Suda with tameh hands. So Bet Hillel says, therefore, to avoid this, do whatever drinking it is that you want to do, and then wash your hands afterwards. This way, at least you will have Suda with clean hands. Now, this, if you think you understood what we just said, you're making a very big mistake, because we haven't even explained what Tum'ah is, right? From the Torah, you have the levels of Tum'ah of what we call Avi Avota Tum'ah, which is a corpse, right? That's the grandfather of Tum'ah. That's like the patriarch of Tum'ah. And it's only for a corpse. Then you have Av HaTum'ah, right? The father of Tum'ah. You have Rishon LeTum'ah, you have Sheni LeTum'ah, you have Shlishi LeTum'ah, you have Revi'i LeTum'ah. And that's about it. And Shlishi LeTum'ah is only, this is, from here and on, Shlishi and Revi'i, they're only for Truma and Kodashim, right? So, in other words, a regular chulin, regular food that's not Kodashim or Truma does not become Shlishi LeTum'ah. Usually, when you touch something, if it's Avi Avota Tum'ah, he makes it one level down, right? Avi Avota Tum'ah could make an Ava Tum'ah, right? If you touch a corpse, come in contact with it, you become an Ava Tum'ah. Ava Tum'ah makes Rishon LeTum'ah. Rishon makes Sheni LeTum'ah. This is the basic rules of Tum'ah. Now, there are rabbinic levels of Tum'ah.
What is Tum'ah?
Impurity, right? There are levels of impurity that are rabbinic. They're not from the Torah. For instance, right? Chazal made a gezerah that your hands, because of people who may be eating truma and so on, they made it that the yadayim, tumat yadayim is that your hands become tameh, become impure, but it's only the hands and it's sheni letuma, right? Normally you don't have that. You're either your whole body is tameh, right, or not, and sheni letuma will be a level of the Rabbanan in this case. And not only that, Chazal made a gezerah that stam yadayim are sheniyot l'tumah. Regularly speaking, when you don't know what you have done with your hands, you don't know for sure that you touched something tameh, but you also don't know that you didn't. We assume that your hands are sheni l'tumah, right? That they are this. That's stam yadayim. Stam yadayim, right? This is stam yadayim are sheniyot l'tumah, right? Not only that, Chazal made another gezerah called tum'at mashkin. Tum'at mashkin means if you have a liquid and the liquid touches even a sheni l'tumah, right? Touches something that's sheni l'tumah, the tum'ah of mashkin goes one level up and becomes rishon l'tumah, right? Exception to the rule that usually goes down, becomes lower. This one goes up. So if you have a mashke that touches sheni l'tumah, it becomes rishon l'tumah, and now could in turn make the kli sheni l'tumah.
Regarding keys only, or
This is for now. Let's talk about kelim only, and we'll get to the discussion of what the details are. So therefore, now you could understand what Bet Shammai is saying. Bet Shammai says, well, if I have my hands tameh, my hands that are tameh are going to touch the droplets of water outside the cup, right? And those waters, my hands are sheniyot l'tumah, and now the droplets become rishon l'tumah, and now they could make the cup tameh sheni l'tumah. My hands cannot directly make the cup tameh if it's not wet outside of it, because sheni doesn't make the kelim don't become shlishi, right? And it has to be rishon to make a kli tameh. So the only way you can have it is if you have liquid that becomes rishon l'tumah from my hand, who are stam yadayim sheniyot l'tumah. It's a chumrah on top of a chumrah, right? And then they make the kli a sheni l'tumah, right? But Hillel say no, exactly the opposite. If the cup is tameh, right, sheni l'tumah, and you have some water that splashes outside, or I have my hands wet, and my hands aren't clean because I just did Netilat Yadayim, going to Bet Shammai. So my hands are wet. I touch this. What just happened? The water became Rishon. My hands became Sheni. I just washed Netilat Yadayim, and all of that is gone. And now I'm eating a whole Suda with Yadayim that are Tameh. So that's the basic machloket of Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel. Now we're going to be discussing details of it as we go through this few lines. Says the Gemara. So again, Bet Shammai omrim notlin leyadayim ואחר כך מוזגין את הכוס, כי אם אתה אומר מוזגין את הכוס, תחילה הגזרה שמה יטמאו משכין שאחורי הכוס מחמד ידיו ויחזרו ויטמאו את הכוס. They're going to go back and make the cup tameh. The Gemara asks, it says, "V'litamu yadayim lekos." So why don't we just say that your hands are going to make the cup tameh, right? Why do you need the mashkin? If your hands are tameh because you didn't wash Netilat Yadayim, remember, but Shammai says you have to wash Netilat Yadayim before drinking. So why don't they just say, well, if your hands are dirty, just not dirty, tameh, right? Your hands are impure. You're going to touch the cup, and the cup is going to become tameh. Why don't they just say that? Says the Gemara, because yadayim sheniyoten, yadayim, the hands are sheniyot l'tum'ah, right? They're here. And sheniyot ve'en sheni oseh shelishi bechulin. Remember, shelishi and revi'i is only reserved for teruma and kochim. So kelim don't become shelishi l'tum'ah. So therefore, in chulin, in regular items that are not kadosh, are not teruma or kochim, they don't become shelishi. So your hands cannot make something tameh directly because sheni does not make sheni. And the cup could only become sheni, rishon, or higher. It cannot become shlishi. So if you don't have the conduit, so to speak, of the liquid going back up rishon and then making it sheni, making the cup sheni, the cup does not become tameh on its own, just touching your hands. So says the Gemara, Ela al yedeh mashkin, only through mashkin you could make it sheni, because the mashke, as we mentioned before, becomes rishon. That's Bet Shammai. Ubet Hillel omdim. Bet Hillel say mozgin et hakos ve'achar kach notlin leyadayim. They say you first do your drinking and then you wash netilat yadayim. Why? She'im ata omer notlin leyadayim techila. If you say you have to wash your hands first, netilat yadayim gezerah shema yetamu mashkin shebeyadayim machamat hakos. The water that's still a residual water on your hand after you do netilat yadayim may become tameh from the kos, from the cup that is tameh, the back of the cup, and then the cup is sheni. The liquid on your hand becomes rishon and makes your hand sheni, and you're sitting eating a suda, feeling good about yourself while having tameh hands.
Why not just require the cup to make sure that the cup is not, the cup is tahor, and then it's fine.
So because Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai, as we're going to see, they have a fundamental machloket. Bet Shammai holds you cannot have utensils that are tameh around the table, and we'll see it by the table itself also in the next piece of the Gemara. And Bet Hillel said there's no problem with having tameh utensils during the Suda.
It's full.
During then your hands are clean. If you didn't left yadayim afterwards, what? You don't have that cup anymore. It's gone. If they drink, they have a cup, yes, but then you're in the middle of Suda anyways. So you have to try to be more careful with that. But you don't have that problem in the beginning because you're just drinking. So if your hands are wet because you didn't netilat yadayim and it's mutar to use a cup, then a tameh cup, a sheni letumah cup, then if your hands are not completely dry, then you could end up making your hands tameh, which in turn, meaning the water on top of your hands tameh, which in turn would make your hands sheni letumah, right? So that's prior to doing starting the Suda. But in the Suda, again, even though that later on you bring mashkin in the Suda, but by then hopefully your hands are dried. The only problem is when you have wet hands, which happens in the beginning. If you wash your hands right now and you come and take a cup because you're drinking, your hands are still wet. But if I wash my hands for Suda, I'm not drinking, that's not the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to be eating bread, eating food, whatever it is that I'm eating. So that dries up already the hand. In the middle of Suda, you want to have a little water. It's not, your hands are not wet. So let's say they do. Not necessarily wet. Depends on what you have. If you used your bread to eat with it. Yeah. The eating habits of with hand, I'm not getting into. But again, the basic thing is that they had water on the hand. It's more probable to have droplets of water on your hand if you just washed your hands netilat yadayim and you're touching a cup, then 20 minutes into your Suda, that perhaps your hands are dry. So says the Gemara.
I'll be concerned about the material of the cup itself. I don't want to get ahead of it.
Let's read the Gemara because we're out of time already. Just want to finish this first part. It says the Gemara, why don't you just say that the cup itself should make your hands tameh? Says the Gemara, en keli metameh adam. Keli cannot make you tameh because, again, we're talking about sheni letumah, and they don't make you tameh. V'nitmi lemashkin shebetocho. So why don't we say, well, what your whole problem is the cup is going to be tameh, and the cup is going to make the liquid on your hand tameh, in which case it's going to make your hand tameh, but the cup is full of drink itself. So the droplets outside tameh, why doesn't he make the drink inside tameh? And then you're drinking tameh wine. Why isn't that a problem? That's an obvious question that everyone should ask. Gemara says, because we're talking about the Tum'ah D'Rabbanan. We're talking about the Tum'ah D'Rabbanan of the droplets outside the cup, which Chachamim, in order to differentiate between a Tum'ah D'Oraita and a Tum'ah D'Rabbanan, they made the gezerah only on the outside of the kli. So when the kli becomes tameh tum'ah d'Rabbanan, a rabbinic level of tum'ah, it only if you touch the back of it and that became tameh, it only maintains the outside tameh, but inside of it is good to go. Inside of it is tahor still.
So you drink with a straw, so your lips don't go outside of the
Or however else you do it, that it does not touch the outside. Says the Gemara, the tochot tahor begabot tameh. The inside is tahor, outside is tameh. It's none, as we learned in the Mishnah, keli shenitmu achorav b'mashkin achorav temein, a kli that became a tameh tum'ah d'Rabbanan. Outside of it, only outside of it stays tameh achorav temein. And tocho ve'ogno, the inside of it and the lip of it around it, right? The part that folds, like this cup has a part that folds back, that's ogen, right? So inside of it and the lip around it, ve'ozno, and the handles and yadav. Ozen is when you have like this. Yadayim is when you have one handle. Ozen is when you have a two-sided attached. All of those are tahor, nitma tocho, nitma kulo. But if it became tameh inside of it, then the entire thing becomes tameh. And then the Gemara is going to discuss what exactly is the core of this machloket. In other words, let's just end with explaining why the setup for this question. Both of them are making sure that you don't eat food that's tameh. They're just getting to that result from different ways. So what exactly is the machloket of Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai? Why can't each one of them agree with the other one and say, well, Bet Shammai holds you can't use, you can't wash because this and this and this. And if you do like Bet Shammai, you are guaranteeing to have tahor. And if you do like Bet Hillel, you're guaranteeing to have tahor. So why can't they agree with each other is the machloket that we're going to explain B'ezrat Hashem in the days to come.
I'd like to from last week.